Welcome, everyone, to today's LinkedIn Live. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. I'm going to introduce our guest in a second. Our topic today for today's LinkedIn Live, the hidden deal killers, emotional, legal, and financial exit traps. We're going to talk about exits, obviously. We're going to talk about some of the things that I think trip founders up, particularly not only the legal side, but also the financial side and the emotional side. We're going to cover all these. Excited for this. If you're watching here live on LinkedIn, if you have a comment or questions, go ahead and put it on the LinkedIn page. We'll watch those during the session. We'll weave those in as we get them. We're also streaming on YouTube. If you're on YouTube, I'm not going to be watching YouTube comments, so jump over to LinkedIn if you want to leave a live comment here. However, if you're watching replay on either platform, feel free to leave a comment or question. We'll watch those posts in the coming days and weeks, make sure we get back to people there. So even if you're on the replay, go ahead and leave comments and questions. Let me introduce our guest. First up, I've got Sankeetha Selvaraja. No, I butchered that. Selvaraja.
Selvaraja. Yeah.
Selvaraja. Thank you. I appreciate it. And she's a really interesting background. She's an M&A attorney. She's over 17 years of experience. She's advised on countless transactions. But she's also built and sold her own company. So we're going to hear about some personal experience there as well. She brings both legal expertise and lived founder perspective to the exit process. With all that, Sankeetha, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. Next, I got Trisha Tate. She is an ex-Wall Street corporate finance professional, and she's now a CFO. She's a financial strategist, and she works with business owners to help build strong financial infrastructures, helping them prepare for exits. And she also understands the real drivers behind valuation, cash flow, and buyer scrutiny. With all that, Trisha, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Bruce. Glad to be here.
You both. Yeah, great to have you both. So let's dig into this. And I know it's interesting because we got a couple different perspectives here, financial, the legal, and I'd love to kind of touch on some of the emotional things as well that you've seen sort of founders be challenged with. What I'd love to get from each of you, though, like the top thing that you see in terms of the big kind of challenges founders have. And I'm hoping a lot of founders are listening to this that are thinking about exiting at some point. And I think that it's until you've gone through an exit or you've worked through the exit process, they're just things you don't know about and you just don't realize and you don't appreciate. Sankeetha, let's start with you. Like, what do you think is kind of the one or two big misses that you see founders kind of make when they start thinking about an exit, preparing for exit, or get into the exit process?
The first thing is honestly not planning their exit earlier. So the point shifts from you're only a scaler until you start planning a full exit plan. Then you become an exiter at that point, because then you have an end point of that actual exit that you're working for. The beautiful thing about having an exit plan is the fact that you don't have to sell. You're just actually planning for it. Yeah. And it's almost like a will or a succession plan for your company at the same time. And it also allows you to scale by default. So when you plan an exit, you actually work backwards from that endpoint of, I want to sell my company for 20 million in 3 years. At that point, you work backwards and you think through, okay, in 36 months, I have to make my company at least valued at book value at 20 million at that point. So everything goes towards that. And I think the biggest issue is thinking that you have an exit is one thing, but actually putting numbers and a date actually makes you an exiter, and it becomes more concrete. You can also align all of your advisors to that. So your advisory board all follows that number and everything goes towards that.
Yeah. I always find it when I ask founders, like, are you ready to exit? And I ask them about the number. They say, I'm thinking like 20 million. And I know they haven't planned, because it's the founders that tell me it's like, well, it's 22.5 million is what I need. Like, I'm like, okay, you've planned because you've actually thought about it. Like you've done the calculations, you know where you are, you know the timeframes. You mentioned that they should do it early. Like, what's early for you? Like what kind of time frame, what window do you need to start exit planning?
So me and Trisha go back on this because it's almost like you have to exit before you start. So don't start a company until you've planned out its exit, but that's almost premature in its own way because it morphs in its own way and this beautiful creature in itself. But honestly, a good starting point is 12 months of revenue. You have at least 12 consistent months of revenue so that you can actually take a look at it and see, what does this look like? Some hard numbers on what that looks like. And then thinking through the potential trends for the next 2 to 3 years at that point. Not too much farther, just because of the fact that you want to keep it manageable. And, any single external event could also come in that could also change those trends as well too. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Trisha, how about you? What do you notice, or what are the things that you kind of find when you're working with clients that really kind of trip them up in terms of being prepared for an exit?
Their financials are a mess many times. And that's the first thing that buyers are going to look at. I know in due diligence, you got to look at contracts and all these other things, but many times financially, they're not prepared. And because of that, my time frame, per the question that you asked, Sankita, I think you need to be thinking 2 to 3 years prior to exit, because sometimes it takes a little time just to clean up the books and the financials and to make sure that the infrastructure is supportive of your growing of the business that you've grown. You might also want to improve your margins, not just your top line, but your margins, because most businesses are valued based on EBITDA, not all kinds of businesses, right? And then a buyer or even a succession planner, or even if you wanted to sell the business to employees via an ESOP or some structure like that, they're going to look at least 2-3 years back at financials. So even if you wake up today or, and think that you're going to exit in 3 months or 12 months, you want to give yourself time to like clean some things up to prepare. So I would say, definitely the financials. The second thing is, I don't think people really invest in the support network they need for exit. They think it's easier than it is. And then they don't realize, like, you definitely want the lawyer to make sure, the contracts are right and the documentation is right, because a buyer is going to try to figure out what are all of the different ways they can knock down your price, your valuation, right? Hopefully you get a full valuation, but then you got to pay for the valuation specialist. You want to make sure that your personal financial manager is on board, because you want to determine how much you need to live, right, in order to exit appropriately. You definitely want to have a fractional CFO on your team to help support the financial infrastructure and make sure you're continuing to grow even as you exit. Just because you're preparing to exit doesn't mean you stop growing the profits, right? And then this last one, we didn't touch on we'll touch on the emotional, but, I've heard from founders that have exited, some of them who are not really prepared for the afterlife, go into this form of like depression and identity crisis. So maybe even a therapist that
I do. I require all of my I require any founder I'm coaching to have a therapist, but certainly if they're in an exit process.
So you want to have these people on your team, and you want to be able to like speak with your CFO on making sure you can invest in these people. It is an investment, but the point is to get you at a smooth and potentially premium exit.
I'm curious when you say, books are messed up, because I think every founder I've talked to, and I like, well, how are your books? And they say, oh yeah, they're fine, right? Or they're good enough. What actually kind of gets messed up, and how is kind of a reasonably clean operating set of books different from what you need to actually tell your story in an exit process? Like what are some of the things that founders really should be kind of thinking about looking at to self-evaluate their situation?
So somebody asked in a workshop I was at, what do clean books look like? What does that mean? Right. And so let's say you're using QuickBooks Online. And the first thing I would do when assessing a potential client is I ask for access to the QuickBooks Online, because I want to see if it is messy, and we have to start at that place of cleanup before we actually get to the strategy work. So I look at the financial reports. Many times the P&L is not set up from an accounting perspective. You can't really tell a story of the business. It's just too messy. Things are in the wrong place. Like, for example, a common issue, customer prepayments. If a customer prepaid you, that's not income. That's a liability until you've earned it, right? So many times the P&L and the balance sheet are perfect indicators that it's not clean. What does not clean mean? The chart of accounts, which is the vertebrae of any reports or any financial system, is not accurate, correct. The numbers aren't in the right place, and they're not in the right place according to accounting standards. So I always make sure, I always tell business owners, even though you have a bookkeeper, does the bookkeeper know accounting, not just the software? Because I can always tell when the bookkeeper they thought was so fabulous that they've been using since the beginning of their business does not know accounting because things are in the wrong place. So if the data is in the wrong place according to accounting and financial standards, then I can't rely on the records. To me, that's messy. That's what books that aren't clean or reliable mean.
Yeah. I want to jump over to the legal side a little bit, Sangeeta. When I find this a lot where, we start thinking about going to market and we start looking at the deal team, and, the founder is like, oh yeah, I've got my lawyer. They're great. I've worked with them for, 10 years, 15 years. And we get into it and realize, this lawyer has never done a transaction, and like it can become, difficult. What's the difference between kind of your general corporate kind of contract business lawyer versus someone who really understands M&A? Like what is the difference, and how do you tell that difference, and why is it important for founders?
So it's all a contract. The deal doesn't get done unless there's an ASA or a PSA. Either way, it's all a contract. It's true. And you always need a good business attorney through the lifeline of your business, for sure. An M&A attorney is a mergers and acquisitions attorney that specifically specifies in the sale or the acquisition of a company, the merger as well, or even the divestiture of certain assets in your company. So there's certain nuances, and that just comes from consistent deal making, or just even most of this is deal making, where I'll give you X, you give me Y. Let me tell you of the value proposition. So taking Trisha's books, clean as they are, well, we use that as a form of negotiation. That's the basis for all of our negotiating points, right? And then understanding the value between the buyer's needs and then the seller's wants at that point, and putting it together. So to do that, and again, not to discount any business attorney can go ahead and learn the ropes of being an M&A attorney, or just learning good mergers and good acquisition with the deal docs. But it's really the true nature of that is really the deal making and the negotiation side. Right. And then understanding that both sides want to come out on a win-win scenario. Right. So at that point is actually, it goes for the founder as well. And I'll say this, the founder also should understand the buyer's point of view in order to actually sell the story that the CFO and the lawyer will be creating together in order to make a successful sale happen.
Yeah. I've certainly found a couple of deals where, we tell very different stories to different buyers because they have very different needs, and they have very different plans for the company. And so you have to have the good foundations. Like you need the numbers, you need understanding of where you are, from a business point of view, to understand how you're going to pitch it to a given buyer, and understanding their needs is I think the kind of the key part of the deal process. Is why are they buying? If we can figure that out, now we've got a strategy. Without understanding that, then we're just throwing noodles against the walls and to see what sticks. So
100%, I'll agree with that. In addition to creating an exit plan, you should also have some sort of 3 buyer profiles. Who are your 3 potential buyers that you think would buy you? And then actually actively follow their career or company trajectory, understanding the trends in their industry as well too. So is their industry growing? Is their industry tanking? Is their industry also moving and growing at the same time as you are? Or is their industry doing a lot of acquisitions? Right? Do they have access to capital? So we talked about this, is that same access to capital that they have is the one that's going to actively give you a good sale, right? So the more capital they have, the better your chances to having a good deal. So understanding that, and I think a lot of buyers, one of the biggest deal killers I can think of is that a lot of buyers stay in their comfortable, feedback loop, in their little comfort zone, and they don't think outside of that box. That box is the one is going to show you who your potential buyers could be, and it could be one, your competitor, your partner.
Well, let's talk about that, because I think that's one thing I run into a lot, where a founder says, "Oh, I'm going to sell a company. I'm going to sell to private equity," and they have a very particular or sort of fixed idea of how this exit is going to go. And then when we get into it, either we realize, well, there's lots of different private equities, and they have very different, they're very different structures, very different intentions. They buy very different things. They do very different things with them. But then you also run into strategics, right, which is going to be a very different kind of sale. And you also, you can think about selling to employees. You can do management buyouts, ESOPs. You can, direct competitors, right? Sometimes that's a very clean, very simple way to exit. I've even made cases where it's easier to wind this thing down, right, based on where it is and the assets, and there's better ways of kind of monetizing or creating value in this situation. How do you, or what are some questions, or what are some things that founders need to think about in terms of those multiple different types of exits and helping them figure out what's most likely, or understanding the pros and cons of that. I'll let either one of you chime in on that.
Can I?
Yeah.
I want to chime in on. I want to answer the question and also affirm Sankita's the exercise that she talked about, writing out your 3 buyer profiles.
Yeah.
Because what I'm also hearing from a number of buyers who have sold to private equity or venture capital, they didn't get what they were expecting. If you really care about what your business, I don't want to say your baby, but what happens to your business in the afterlife, then that's going to determine who you decide to sell to, right?
Yeah.
And so I think doing that homework, for also from an emotional standpoint, I literally have heard people say, I thought by selling, I was sending my baby off to college.
Ooh,
right?
interesting.
But then when it went to the buyer stripped it, destroyed the employee culture, did not treat it the way that they thought would happen.
Yeah.
And either they had sold it to a big corporation or private equity. I get it. You got maximum top dollar. But if you really care about the legacy of the business, the people inside of it, then that is also going to narrow your scope of potential buyers. So, to specifically answer your question, people want to really think about what they want the business to look like. What is the legacy that they want? What do they want the employees to have? Like, not just what they want monetarily, but what they want the business to look like afterwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna double click on that word right there, because that's really important. And in developing your legacy as well, I would also recommend that founders learn how to kill their darlings early. And that means firing the people that's not going to work out, that's going to contribute to your long-term legacy. And then understanding what that looks like as well too. So I was at a conference yesterday, we were talking about AI, and presenter said that AI doesn't make bad processes better. It just makes them faster, more relevant. And so at that point, you start to think about even your employee decisions, your management decisions. If you dig your heels in too deep because of that, sunken cost fallacy, right? Like you spent so much time on it, you have to get. But I think the true act of exiting very cleanly is to letting go of things that just don't work.
Yeah.
In a faster fashion as well too.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a general phrase that I use with founders I work with, is that the faster we want to scale, the more we need to focus, and you need to choose, right? You need to choose a core customer, you need to choose an offering, you need to choose a product, you need to dial that in, and that's going to help you scale faster. And it can be counterintuitive, or at least for founders who have been very scrappy and they've kind of been successful by just kind of chasing lots of things. Like, it's a really different mindset, and it really impacts the exit too, because if you're a business, maybe you're doing 30 million, but you're working with all these different customer bases. You've got this hodgepodge of services, a whole bunch of different products that are all very different. Like, a buyer may look at that and say, well, I like these 2 or 3 things, but the 7, 8 other things you're working on, like, I just can't value at the same level, or I'm going to have to divest of them later, right? So the cleaner you can make the offering and the focus, it actually makes the sale process easier and more likely, more successful, I find.
And also along that path is also, even if they only want to buy those 1 or 2 things, that's okay. You can do an asset purchase there.
Exactly. Yeah. Right? That's why I say slice it up. It may be easier to slice it up. Yeah.
Exactly. And that is one thing, is every founder should know the value of each of their assets, enough so that sometimes the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. Yeah. And knowing how to, strategically sell off portions of your company so that you can get the greatest return. And maybe some parts you care more about the legacy than others, right? And so
I made that point at a clinic. Goldman Sachs 10,000 small businesses had the succession planning clinic, and I did say that to people. I said, listen, you don't have to set it up beautifully for all of it, for sale. Some people might just value one little piece of it, and the sum of the parts might be the parts might be worth more than the whole thing. But I also said to them, you can think of your business like a house. Some people just want to fix and flip.
Yeah.
Some people will buy the thing that they need to work on and fix. You just won't get a premium for it. You'll get a discount, but you could be okay with that, right? Some people sell a house as is. And there is a whole ecosystem right now of people who are in this like entrepreneurship through acquisition
Yeah.
that are looking to buy businesses as part of their portfolio, or just to try their hand at entrepreneurship and not build it from scratch like Sankita and I did crazily. But there's a world out there, and I think there's a lot of people who have exited corporate, people, middle managers, people coming out of business school. It's a huge, sexy world and thing. It's a thing now to buy businesses, right?
Yeah.
So you can sell it as is, or you can fix her up and sell her at a premium.
Yeah.
Or parts.
There's no such thing as like a clean deal. Very rarely is it categorized as a clean deal. The best deal is a done deal. That's it. It's a done, closed deal. And also time, it's a powerful variable that people don't accommodate for. And understanding that from the time of LOI to time of closing, the longer that takes, is the chances of it closing shrinks.
Yeah, exactly. Your survivability goes up.
Actually maintaining the value proposition again and again and again to both parties.
Yeah, I do find, I think what is kind of underappreciated and underinvestigated a lot is some of these alternative structures. And I mean, I've seen people just move into a licensing deal. It's like, hey, I've got this great thing. Rather than selling it, let's license this piece out. We can monetize that a lot better and a lot easier and still maintain, ownership. The other one I find is a lot of these founders, right? They've got another business idea, which can be quite powerful. And so we're dealing with a company who's, we could probably take 2 or 3 years and clean it up and maybe take it from 15 to 20 and improve the valuation and everything. But they're sitting on a new idea that could be $100 million business. And so it's really this kind of opportunity cost a lot of the time that comes into play. And they might be better off just sell the thing as it is, get some capital that you can roll into the new business, particularly if it's time sensitive, get that other thing going, and don't worry about trying to optimize this business so much. It's like, get into this next business that has a lot more potential. But because everyone's kind of focused on, getting the best deal and like getting the highest valuation, like they really don't think about, well, what are all the other kind of factors in terms of the nature of the deal? And, what's the cost of spending another 3 years in a business, right? When you've got other things that you could be doing. Let's talk a little bit about this afterlife, kind of post-exit. I'm sure you've both seen kind of stories of things happening post-exit. What are some of the challenges you've seen in terms of after someone actually goes through a transaction, whether it's they're staying on in a earnout or in a leadership role or management role, or whether they're getting a clean exit and they're moving on to something else? What are some of the things that founders don't sort of think about or don't appreciate that's going to happen post-exit? Any stories there you can share? Yeah.
I'm going to start with go ahead.
For me, usually I always check in with my sellers 6 months after closing, just to say, how you doing? How's wherever yacht you're on.
Yeah. How's golf? Yeah.
How's that afterlife? I like that word, Trisha. It's
Yeah.
And we always ask, I go, do you regrets? Any regrets?
Yeah.
And they're like, no, I'm glad that I sold the company. Okay. Across the board, most people are glad they sold the company. However, the number one thing that comes up is, I wish I sold it for more. Okay. So dollar value. And then 2, then we talk about, what does the daily life look like for them? And they're like, if they weren't already planned it out, if they hadn't already planned out their daily life, so intellectual boredom fits in.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. They're like, there is a part to, even though you can get burnt out, you're stressed, the push and pull of owning a company, the fact is it engages your mind on the regular.
Yeah.
And so to have something where you actually feel like, okay, now what? I also experienced that when I merged my company. I was like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So my day was done by noon. Now what? And leaving me, obviously don't leave me unsupervised here, because then I come up with another idea or so forth. And which is, after a while, it does happen. And then also the realities of their own familiar life also gets in, right? So if you've been avoiding, your family by going to work and then having the company, now you've sold the company. Now you have to face the things you might not have been able to do before, or you've quietly avoided because of work, right?
Yeah.
So the subtle nuances of daily life creep in and are magnified in the afterlife. So if you're not prepared for that, or understand that, or address that before sale, you will be in for a bigger transition.
Yeah. Trisha, what's your... Yeah.
One of the... So from a financial perspective, if you went through seller's financing and you're going to be there a couple of years, determining the right metric by what you're going to be measured by. Is it top line, or is it going to be profitability? Because some part of it you can't really affect.
Yeah.
unless you are in control of it, right? And so you want to be very thoughtful about what is the right metric you're using in order to measure, like the exit or the milestone for you to exit. The second thing is, if the employees have been accustomed to working with you, then whoever the operator is better be okay that you're basically still CEOing, right? So if they have any ego about taking over the company and being respected as the new CEO, I mean, you've been there. The employees know you. They're from a decision, approvals, grievances. They're gonna come to you if you're continuing to manage the company in the afterlife. So, I mean, we haven't spoken about this, but all the business brokers out there are going to say the number one deal killer is owner dependency.
Yeah.
And hopefully you've worked through most of that before you actually sell the business. But people can't help their normal culture and way of being. And so, if you are still a linchpin or in a decision-making position, it might be harder for you to leave if you don't cut and actually leave.
Yeah. Yeah. I do find I've seen a couple of earnouts where, the founders are still involved. They're running day-to-day operations. They've got a significant amount of value on the line in terms of hitting metrics. And they end up, between a rock and a hard place where the new owners, want to make certain decisions that the founder wouldn't really want to make, but they can't anymore, right? They don't own the company, but yet all the people kind of point to them or look to them for, the guidance, and they, it's frustrating. And their money's on the line. And, I've seen many founders walk away from situations.
You become an employee. You still have power. You're the most powerful employee in the company, but you don't have decision rights.
Yeah.
So it's a very weird place to be, which takes me back to the questions that you need to ask yourself with the therapist. What do you want? Like, if you still need that salary and that health insurance, go for it. Do the earnout, right? If you want to lay back and not do as much from an operational standpoint in this earnout, be very clear with yourself about what you want, because it will also help you with negotiating each of these points.
Yeah. Yeah. I generally say be very happy with the money you get at the table at close. And then anything else from there is going to be gravy. But like, if you're banking on that money, if that you need that money to be happy or need that money to do whatever you really want to do, that's where you get into trouble, because you no longer will control the company, but you're dependent on its financial performance. And I just, I find things go sideways there.
I would also say with the earnouts, especially on the legal side, before you even sign the paperwork and you're agreeing to an earnout, run some models with your attorney and run some models with your CFO of what happens if this happens and this happens and this happens, like introducing variables in there, and double check with the buyer if they're comfortable with those variables and those ranges as well, so that you're both on the same page to manage expectations. Because at that point, the deal hasn't been inked yet, and you can still work around it. But once it's been inked and time passes, again, time being the most powerful variable of all, and new management, much as you're the most powerful employee there, the fact of the matter is the management still supersedes you, and their decisions are going to be the ones that are going to be the lever that changes that company. So in that, all variables before you sell the company are yours. After that, it becomes the new buyer. And that can change the potential earnout. And this is where I see a lot of contention happen post-sale. And it's not a groovy afterlife at that point, because now people are having serious issues with your perception of what a true earnout is and what the numbers don't line up. So running a model, running some ranges, asking questions, what is available, what is appropriate, and then coming to that before you ink that deal is important to protect you in the future as well too.
Yeah.
I wanted to add this very quick note is that your CFO, fractional CFO, could be very supportive to you even as you transition out into the next business, right? And they could be a holdover person that goes with the buyer, because if they know the reporting, they know the ins and outs of the numbers, they've created the financial support structure. By the way, having a strong internal financial infrastructure can be seen as a valuable asset. I know people don't think about it. They think about contracts and recurring revenue and employees and trademarks and copyrights. But having reporting that's reliable is a valuable asset. So if you can leverage that and then tell the buyer, here, I'm also giving you reliable numbers and a team that can help you manage the business from a financial perspective in the beginning, in the earlies, then that's also like a home run.
Yeah.
For the seller.
I'm sure we could do this for another couple of hours here. We're going to hit time. I want to make sure people have contact information. Trisha, if people want to find out more about you, the work that you do, what's the best way to get that?
Okay, so I am on LinkedIn at Trisha M. Tate. My name is there. I'm also on Instagram at FinCore Strong. Website is fincorestrong.com. And if you want to get my book, I also have a book called Dancing with Numbers on Amazon. It's like having a CFO in your pocket if you can't afford a CFO right now. But if you can, if you're like in that space of like 2 to 10 million and it's time for you to get strategic guidance, please do check out, a fractional CFO. But these are the places where I am.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sangeeta, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Sangeeta Salvaraja. I'm on LinkedIn as well at S Salvaraja. And my website is Zensei, ZENSEI, exit, exit.com. And again, also practicing attorney. And if you get me on LinkedIn, we can discuss more about your options.
Excellent. If anyone wants to reach me, just bruce@eckfeldt.com, email eckfeldt.com is URL, and obviously on LinkedIn. Trisha, Sangeeta, well, thank you so much for taking the time today. Absolute pleasure. If anyone, the audience is watching this again on the replay, go ahead and leave comments and questions on the page there. We'll watch those in the coming days and week where we respond to things. Look forward to engaging with folks and look forward to seeing everyone on the next LinkedIn Live. Thank you again, everyone. Take care.
You're welcome.
Thanks.